Sergeant Jake Collins wasn't a man who wore his emotions on his sleeve. Years of military service had taught him to be tough, to focus on the mission, and to keep personal feelings locked away. But Thunder, the warhorse he'd been paired with in his last deployment, was different. From the moment they met, something between them clicked. It was a connection that neither bullets nor distance could break. Thunder wasn't just a horse. He was a warrior, trained to navigate the harshest terrains and withstand the chaos of battle. Thunder carried Jake through some of the toughest missions, through narrow mountain passes where ambushes waited in the shadows, through dust storms that blinded the eyes but not the heart, and through nights so cold they seemed endless. Thunder was there, steady, brave, and unshakable. Jake remembered the first time he rode Thunder into a combat zone. The horse's muscles rippled beneath him, powerful and precise. Thunder's ears twitched at every sound, gunfire, distant shouts, even the faintest rustle of leaves that might signal danger. Jake trusted Thunder with his life, and the horse seemed to understand it, matching every movement and instinct with unwavering loyalty. They were a team in every sense of the word. When Jake's unit moved quietly through the rough countryside, Thunder's calm presence kept the men grounded. When danger came, Thunder's speed and strength saved lives. Jake often said Thunder had a sixth sense, sensing threats before anyone else. It was as if the horse knew the risks and chose to stand strong anyway. But war was never just about battles. It was about moments between the chaos, moments where two souls connected, despite the noise and fear. Jake would often find himself whispering to Thunder, sharing worries, hopes, or just the silence that came after a firefight. Thunder would lower his head, resting it gently against Jake's chest as if saying, "I'm here." Their bond was forged in those quiet moments, just as much as in the heat of battle. Jake felt that Thunder saved him not only from danger, but from the loneliness that war brought. He wasn't alone anymore. He had a companion who understood, without words. The months passed quickly, and Jake's tour eventually came to an end. The thought of leaving Thunder behind was unbearable. But military rules were strict. Horses like Thunder were reassigned, sometimes sent to other bases, or retired to stables far away. There was no promise they'd ever see each other again. The day Jake said goodbye was harder than any firefight. He rode Thunder one last time through the base, the familiar rhythm of hooves on dirt echoing in his heart. Thunder seemed to sense the farewell too, his usual calm replaced by a quiet sadness. When the handlers came to take Thunder away, Jake clutched the reins tightly, his throat thick with emotion. "Take care of him," Jake whispered, voice barely audible. The handler nodded, but Jake knew the world wasn't always kind to retired war horses. Some ended up on farms, some sold, to private owners who didn't understand their past, and some faced much worse. Back at his barracks, Jake felt hollow. The war had changed him, but leaving Thunder behind felt like losing a part of himself. The nights were long and restless. Thunder's absence was a constant ache, a reminder of the bond he'd risked everything to build. After returning to civilian life in Kentucky, Jake found it hard to adjust. The noise of everyday life felt overwhelming. Crowds, traffic, and the endless rush of things to do made him long for the quiet companionship of Thunder. Sometimes he would find himself staring out at the fields near his home, imagining Thunder galloping freely, ears flicking toward the wind, powerful and proud. Friends and family tried to help, but only those who have formed a true connection with an animal could understand the depth of Jake's grief. Thunder wasn't just a horse he rode in battle. He was a friend, a partner, a symbol of hope during dark days. Jake kept in touch with a few soldiers from his unit, and sometimes they shared stories about their horses. Most had been reassigned or retired, and none had seen their old companions again. That made Jake's longing feel even sharper. As months turned into a year, Jake promised himself he wouldn't give up on finding Thunder. He started following leads, talking to former handlers and animal rescue groups connected to the military. Every time a tip came through, his heart raced, but none of them led to Thunder. Still, Jake held on to hope. Hope was the only thing that kept him going when the memories felt too heavy. The bond they shared was too strong to simply fade away. And then, one ordinary afternoon, everything changed. A simple trip to a local auction would set in motion a reunion neither Jake nor Thunder could have imagined. A Reunion that would test their bond and change their lives forever. Life after the battlefield was harder than Jake Collins ever expected. The quiet hum of civilian life in Kentucky felt almost foreign after months of adrenaline and danger. No more orders, no more missions, just the empty spaces where Thunder used to be. Jake found himself drifting through days, working odd jobs here and there, but nothing felt meaningful. He tried to reconnect with family and friends, but the conversations often turned awkward when the war came up. People asked questions, but they didn't really understand what he had lived through. Most nights, Jake's mind drifted back to Thunder. The memories came flooding in. The feel of Thunder's strong neck beneath his hand, the rhythmic pounding of hooves on dirt roads, and the silent, trusting look the horse gave him in moments of danger. Those memories were both comforting and painful. They reminded him of what he'd lost. He started attending therapy sessions, encouraged by a fellow veteran. Jake wasn't sure it would help, but the therapist listened patiently as Jake talked. About the war, about Thunder, and about the emptiness he felt now. Jake realized that his bond with Thunder had been more than just practical. It had been a lifeline. Losing Thunder felt like losing a piece of himself. Sometimes, to escape the weight of his thoughts, Jake would drive out to the countryside. He would park his truck by a quiet field, roll down the window and watch the horses grazing in the distance. He'd imagine Thunder there, running free under the open sky, the wind lifting his mane. Those quiet moments brought some peace, but they also sparked a deep longing. Jake wanted to see Thunder again, to know his friend was safe and well. The idea of Thunder struggling alone, forgotten by the world, haunted him. Jake began to research. He reached out to former military contacts, animal welfare organizations, and even local auctions. Each inquiry brought a flicker of hope, but also frustration. The trail was cold, and Thunder's whereabouts remained a mystery. His friends noticed the change. Some suggested Jake move on, that he needed to focus on his own life. But Jake couldn't let go. To him, Thunder was more than a horse. He was a reminder of courage, survival, and loyalty. One afternoon, Jake sat in a small cafe, scrolling through online auction listings. Something caught his eye, a horse up for sale, described as experienced but retired, with a strong build and steady temperament. The picture was grainy, but there was something familiar about the horse's stance and eyes. Jake's heart skipped. Could it really be Thunder? The idea seemed too good to be true. Still, he saved the listing and made a note to visit the auction. In person, the days before the auction were filled with nervous anticipation. Jake told himself to be realistic. The horse might be someone else entirely. But a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that fate was giving him a second chance. When the day finally arrived, Jake woke early and drove to the fairgrounds where the auction was being held. The smell of hay, leather, and dust filled the air, bringing back memories. He wandered among the pens, his eyes searching for the familiar figure. And then there he was. Thunder stood quietly in a corner pen, his coat dull, and his body thinner than Jake remembered. Scars and marks told stories of battles fought and hard, years endured. But Thunder's eyes met Jake's with recognition, clear, deep, and unwavering. Jake felt a rush of emotions, relief, sadness, hope, and determination. He knelt beside the fence, reaching out to touch Thunder's muzzle. The horse nickered softly, leaning into the touch like no time had passed. Around them, the auction moved on, unaware of the reunion unfolding in the corner. For Jake, this was more than a chance encounter. It was a call to action. Jake knew. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Thunder was at risk of being sold to anyone willing to pay, maybe for work on a farm, maybe for less kind purposes. Jake had to act fast, had to find a way to bring Thunder home. As the auctioneer called for bids, Jake steeled himself. He didn't have much money saved, but he was ready to fight for Thunder, not just as a horse, but as a friend who had stood by him when it mattered most. This moment was about more than a sale. It was about reclaiming a bond, rewriting a story, and proving that sometimes, even after war and separation, hope can still ride in. The fairgrounds were buzzing with activity as the local livestock auction kicked into full swing. The chatter of bidders mingled with the occasional whinny of horses waiting for their turn on the block. Jake Collins moved slowly among the pens, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and anxiety. After months of searching, here he was, face to face with Thunder, the warhorse who had been more than a companion, more than a friend. Thunder looked different from the last time Jake had seen him. The once shiny coat was now dusty and uneven. His ribs showed faintly beneath the skin, and his gait was slower, weighed down by years of hard work and uncertain care. Yet beneath it all, there was a quiet dignity, a resilience that refused to fade. Jake's fingers trembled as he reached through the fence to stroke Thunder's muzzle. The horse responded immediately, leaning into the touch, his warm breath fogging in the cool air. "Thunder, it's me," Jake whispered. "I'm here now." A few curious onlookers noticed the exchange, but most were focused on the auctioneer's booming voice and the crowd's eager bids. Jake's mind raced. He had to find out everything he could about Thunder's history and what awaited him once the hammer fell. He tracked down the auction staff, explaining who he was and asking questions. They told him Thunder had been retired from military service and sold several times since. Each owner seemed less prepared than the last to care for a horse with Thunder's needs. "He's a good horse," one staff member said quietly, "but he's seen better days." Jake's jaw tightened. He'd seen those better days, and he was determined to give Thunder that life again, or at least a safe one. But he knew he wasn't the only one interested in Thunder. Some buyers wanted horses for farm labor, others for riding lessons, and some, Jake feared, might not treat Thunder with the kindness he deserved. As Thunder was led onto the auction, "Block!" Jake's pulse quickened. The crowd was lively and the bids came fast and fierce. Jake had never been in a situation like this. The money he had saved was modest, and he hadn't planned to buy a horse at an auction, let alone one as expensive as Thunder might be. But the thought of Thunder falling into the wrong hands was unbearable. Jake reminded himself of the bond they shared, the countless times Thunder had saved him from danger, the silent comfort they gave each other. This wasn't just a purchase. It was a rescue mission. Jake stood at the edge of the crowd, watching. As the bids climbed higher and higher, the tension was thick in the air, but Jake's determination only grew. He couldn't let Thunder slip away again. With a steady breath, he raised his hand to place a bid. The crowd shifted, some surprised by the sudden participation of a quiet man who clearly cared deeply. The bidding war was on. Each time Jake raised his hand, his heart pounded louder. He could feel Thunder watching, almost as if the horse knew Jake was fighting for him. The price climbed beyond what Jake thought he could afford, but he pushed forward. Thunder was worth every penny. Finally, with a firm strike of the auctioneer's hammer, Jake's bid won. The crowd erupted in polite applause, unaware of the significance behind the sale. Jake's knees felt weak, and he fought back tears. He hurried to Thunder's side, running his hands down the horse's neck. "We're going home," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. The auction staff helped Jake arrange transport. As Thunder was loaded onto a trailer, Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. This was just the beginning of a long journey to heal and rebuild what war and time had taken away. That night, Jake sat by the fire, thinking about the years ahead. There would be challenges, medical care for Thunder, finding a safe place to live, and facing his own struggles with reintegration. But the reunion had sparked a new fire in Jake's heart. He wasn't just saving a horse. He was reclaiming a part of himself, a part that had been lost in the dust and noise of war. Together, Jake and Thunder would face whatever came next, bound by a loyalty no one else could understand. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, Jake felt hope. The auction was over, and the crowd slowly dispersed. Under the fading afternoon sun, Jake stood beside Thunder, the warhorse he had fought so hard to bring back, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fall away. All the noise, the waiting, the uncertainty, it all melted into the quiet space between them. Thunder lowered his head, eyes softening as Jake gently ran his hand along the horse's dusty neck. The scars and wear from years of service showed, clearly now, some fresh, some old. But what struck Jake most was the strength still lingering beneath Thunder's weary exterior. It was as if Thunder had been waiting, holding on through the hardships, just for this reunion. Jake knelt down, face level with Thunder's eyes, Those dark eyes held a story only Jake could truly understand. Countless miles traveled through hostile lands, the weight of fear and hope, the unspoken promises shared during long, quiet nights. Jake saw not just a horse, but a soul, who had walked beside him through fire and shadow. "I'm here, Thunder," Jake whispered. "I'm not leaving again." Thunder responded with a soft nicker, leaning into the touch, his breath warm against Jake's skin. The bond between them, forged in battle, was still alive, stronger than ever despite the distance and time apart. The handlers began to prepare Thunder for transport, but Jake refused to let go. He took a slow walk around the pen, letting the horse smell his hands, hear the familiar rhythm of his footsteps. It was a ritual of reassurance, a way to remind Thunder that this was no ordinary day. This was a second chance. As Jake walked, memories flooded back. The midnight patrols, the crackle of radios, the way Thunder would steady beneath him when the world felt like it was falling apart. The war had left scars on both of them, visible and invisible, but they had survived. Together, the auction staff watched quietly, sensing something rare between the man and the horse. One of the workers, an older woman named Martha, approached Jake gently. "He's a special horse," she said softly. "You can tell he knows you." Jake nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "He saved my life more times than I can count. Now it's my turn." Martha smiled, then added, "He's lucky to have you." The ride home was slow but peaceful. Thunder stood quietly in the trailer, occasionally shifting to rest his tired legs, while Jake sat nearby, hands on the wood panel, thinking about what lay ahead. The horse was safe now, but healing wouldn't be instant. Over the next few days, Jake worked tirelessly to care for Thunder. He cleaned wounds, fed him nutritious meals, and spent hours just sitting beside the horse, talking quietly. Thunder responded to the patience and kindness, slowly regaining strength and confidence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake sat on the porch of a small farmhouse where Thunder was being kept temporarily. Thunder stood in the nearby paddock, chewing on fresh hay. Jake felt a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. He had won the battle at the auction, but the real work, healing, rebuilding, reconnecting, was just beginning. He thought about the war and all he'd lost, but also about the future. Thunder wasn't just a reminder of the past. He was a symbol of resilience and hope. Jake realized that in saving Thunder, he was also saving a part of himself. That night, Jake dreamed of the days to come. Slow walks through open fields, the sound of Thunder's hooves on soft earth, and the quiet companionship that had always meant more than words. The next morning, Jake woke with a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a caretaker, a friend, and a man who understood the true meaning of loyalty. As he prepared to face the challenges ahead, one thing was certain. Whatever the future held, Jake and Thunder would face it side by side, bound by a look, a touch, and a bond that time and hardship could never break. The days following Thunder's return were a mixture of hope and hard work. Jake knew that saving Thunder at the auction was only the first step. The horse's body had been through years of grueling service, neglect, and uncertainty, and it would take time and patience to bring him back to health. Jake spent his mornings at the stable, waking early to prepare fresh hay and feed for Thunder. The horse, though still thin and weary, showed signs of recognition and trust. He would nuzzle Jake's hand during feeding time, a silent thank you for the kindness. They started slow. At first, just short walks around the paddock, giving Thunder's legs a chance to regain strength. Jake remembered the long marches they had shared in the military, how Thunder's sure footing had saved lives more than once. Now Jake was the one guiding him, careful not to push too hard. The veterinarian came once a week, checking on Thunder's wounds and prescribing treatments for an old injury in his left leg that still caused occasional stiffness. The vet praised Jake's dedication, but warned him that Thunder's recovery would be gradual. "He's tough," the vet said, "but you need to let him heal on his terms." Jake didn't mind the slow pace. Every small improvement was a victory. Thunder's coat started to regain some shine, and the deep, tired eyes gradually brightened. More importantly, Jake noticed Thunder's spirit returning. During quiet afternoons, Jake would sit beside Thunder, sharing stories from the past, or simply offering the comfort of presence. Sometimes Thunder would nicker softly, ears flicking, as if listening intently. Jake believed the horse understood every word, even the ones left unspoken. There were challenges, of course. Some days Thunder seemed withdrawn, the weight of old wounds settling in his muscles. Jake learned to read those signs, offering extra care and rest. Other days, Thunder's playful energy would surprise Jake, a reminder of the horse's youthful strength and resilience. As they healed together, Jake found himself healing too. The trauma and loneliness that had followed him since the war began to loosen their grip. Caring for Thunder gave Jake a new sense of purpose, a reason to keep going. Jake's friends noticed the change as well. He began to smile more, talk more, openly about his experiences, and even started attending a local veterans group where members shared stories and supported one another. Jake spoke about Thunder often, explaining how the horse had been his anchor during the darkest days. One afternoon, as Jake and Thunder walked slowly through a sunlit meadow near the farm, Jake reflected on how far they had come. He remembered their first meeting, the fear and uncertainty of war, and the long separation that had felt unbearable. Now here they were, two survivors, finding strength in each other once again. Thunder suddenly stopped, ears pricked, and looked toward the tree line. Jake paused, following the horse's gaze. A group of children from a nearby farm had gathered, watching quietly from a distance. Jake smiled and invited them over. Soon the children were petting Thunder gently, amazed by his size and calm demeanor. Jake felt a swell of pride. Thunder wasn't just a war horse anymore. He was a symbol of resilience and kindness, teaching a new generation the value of patience and trust. That evening, as Jake brushed Thunder's mane, he realized the horse's journey mirrored his own, a story of survival, healing, and hope. Together, they had faced the horrors of war and the pain of separation. Now their future was unwritten, filled with promise and the quiet strength that comes from true friendship. And through it all, Jake knew one thing for certain: no matter what lay ahead, Thunder would always have a home, and Jake would always be there. Despite the progress Thunder was making, Jake still carried the invisible wounds of war deep inside. Some nights, when the world was quiet, memories would rush back, the thunder of explosions, the sharp commands shouted over the chaos, the faces of friends lost. Those moments hit hardest when he was alone. One evening, after a long day caring for Thunder, Jake sat on the porch of the farmhouse, staring out at the fading light. Thunder grazed nearby, calm and steady, but inside Jake, the storm wasn't. So quiet. He reached for his phone and hesitated, then called the Veterans Support Group. He wasn't sure what to expect, but when a familiar voice answered, Jake felt a flicker of relief. He made an appointment with a counselor specialized in post-traumatic stress. At the first session, Jake struggled to put his feelings into words. The counselor listened patiently, offering understanding without judgment. Slowly, Jake began to open up about the war, the losses, and the guilt that shadowed him. He also spoke about Thunder, how the horse had been a source of strength, a silent partner who had saved him more than once. "It sounds like Thunder gave you something irreplaceable," the counselor said. "Connection, trust, things that can help anchor you through difficult times." Jake nodded. "He's more than a horse to me. He's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there's hope." The sessions became a turning point. Jake learned tools to manage anxiety and intrusive memories. He realized that healing was not a straight path, but a journey full of ups and downs. With Thunder's companionship and the counselor's support, Jake began to feel less alone. One morning, as Jake prepared Thunder for a slow trail ride, he noticed the horse's energy was different, lighter, more alert. As they moved through the woods, the fresh air and gentle movement seemed to clear Jake's mind. The rhythmic sound of Thunder's hooves on the forest floor became a calming heartbeat, grounding Jake in the present. Halfway through the ride, they reached a quiet clearing. Jake dismounted and sat on a fallen log, watching Thunder graze peacefully. In that moment, Jake felt a quiet strength growing inside him, a belief that he could face the shadows of the past without being consumed. But healing wasn't always easy. Some days old fears would resurface unexpectedly, Loud noises, crowds, or even certain smells could trigger flashes of panic. Jake worked hard to recognize these moments and remind himself he was safe. Thunder seemed to understand. On difficult days, the horse would stay close, nuzzling Jake's shoulder or resting his head gently against him. Those small acts of comfort became lifelines for Jake. Meanwhile, the local community began to take notice of the bond between Jake and Thunder. Neighbors stopped by more often, offering help or simply sharing a friendly word. A local equine therapy group invited Jake to share his story, hoping to inspire others. Jake hesitated at first, unsure if his journey was something others would want to hear, but he agreed, realizing that sharing his experience might bring hope to fellow veterans struggling with their own battles. During the group meeting, Jake spoke honestly about the war, his struggles with reintegration, and how Thunder had played a vital role in his recovery. His story resonated deeply, and after the session, several veterans thanked him for his openness. Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. Helping others and caring for Thunder gave his life new meaning beyond the battlefield. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Jake stood beside Thunder in the paddock. The sky was painted with soft pinks and golds, and the cool breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. Jake reached out and gently stroked Thunder's mane, feeling the steady rhythm of the horse's breath. "We've come a long way, haven't we, buddy?" Jake said quietly. Thunder blinked slowly as if understanding. In that moment, Jake realized that while the scars of war might never fully fade, the bond he shared with Thunder was a powerful force, a reminder that healing was possible, even in the aftermath of darkness. Together, they would keep moving forward one step at a time. As the weeks turned into months, Jake and Thunder settled into a routine of healing and rediscovery. The once-worn warhorse grew stronger and more energetic with each passing day, and Jake found a renewed sense of peace in caring for him. But the quiet life on the farm was not enough to satisfy Jake's restless spirit. He knew that he and Thunder shared a story that could inspire others, a story of resilience, loyalty, and hope. With that thought in mind, Jake began to explore ways to give back, to help fellow veterans who were struggling like he once had. One afternoon, Jake visited a local community center that offered support for veterans. He spoke with the director about his experiences and proposed a program that combined equine therapy with peer support. The idea was simple. Veterans would work with horses to build trust, confidence, and healing, just as Jake had done with Thunder. The director was intrigued and encouraged Jake to move forward. Soon, Jake was organizing small workshops, inviting veterans to spend time with Thunder and other gentle horses at the farm. The response was overwhelmingly positive. The veterans who came to the farm were initially cautious, some carrying heavy burdens of their own, but as they worked alongside the horses, grooming, leading, and riding, they began to open up. The animals seemed to sense their pain and offered non-judgmental companionship that no human words could replace. Jake watched as friendships formed and smiles returned to faces that had been shadowed by trauma. He felt proud, knowing that Thunder was helping to change lives beyond just his own. One day, during a particularly emotional session, a young veteran named Mike shared how he had struggled with nightmares and isolation since returning from deployment. Working with Thunder, Mike found a calmness he hadn't felt in years. He spoke openly about his fears, and for the first time felt heard and understood. Jake knew this was exactly why he had fought so hard to save Thunder. The horse was more than a survivor. He was a healer. Outside the therapy sessions, Jake continued to care for Thunder, who now looked healthier and happier than ever. The horse's coat gleamed, his muscles grew strong, and his eyes sparkled with the energy of youth regained. It was a transformation that filled Jake with deep satisfaction. But it wasn't just Thunder who was healing. Jake himself felt a growing sense of purpose and belonging. The pain of the past still lingered, but it was tempered by the knowledge that he was making a difference. The community began to recognize Jake and Thunder as symbols of hope. Local newspapers featured their story, and invitations to speak at veteran events started arriving. Jake used these opportunities to share his message about resilience and the power of connection between humans and animals. One evening, as Jake prepared Thunder for a quiet ride at sunset, he reflected on how far they had come. The horse that had once been lost and forgotten was now a beacon of strength and healing. "We're not just surviving anymore, Thunder," Jake said softly. "We're living." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues, Jake felt a profound sense of peace. The bond between man and horse had carried them through darkness and pain, and now it was lighting a path forward, not just for them, but for many others. Their journey wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Together, Jake and Thunder had found a new mission: to heal, to inspire, and to prove that no matter how deep the wounds, hope and loyalty could build a future worth fighting for. The years that followed were filled with quiet victories and new beginnings. Jake and Thunder had transformed from two broken souls into a team that inspired a whole community. The farm where they lived became a sanctuary, not just for horses, but for veterans seeking healing and hope. Jake's equine therapy program grew steadily. Veterans came from nearby towns and even farther away, drawn by stories of Thunder's gentle strength and Jake's unwavering dedication. The horses seemed to know when someone needed extra care, responding with patience and kindness that words couldn't match. Thunder, once worn and tired, now carried himself with pride and grace. The scars from battle remained, but they were badges of honor, marks of a life lived fully and courageously. And through it all, Thunder and Jake shared a bond that no time or distance could break. One crisp autumn morning, Jake received a letter from an old military friend, Sergeant Mason. The letter spoke of a reunion for veterans and their service animals, a chance to celebrate their shared history and honor the bonds forged in the toughest of circumstances. Jake knew immediately that Thunder would be there with him. The reunion was more than a gathering. It was a tribute to their journey and a testament to the healing power of loyalty. When the day arrived, Jake and Thunder traveled to the reunion site. They were greeted by familiar faces and new friends, all connected by stories of service, sacrifice, and survival. The air was filled with laughter, tears, and the gentle sounds of horses moving quietly among the crowd. As Jake led Thunder through the gathering, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been long and difficult, but the destination was worth every step. He saw veterans reunited with their animals, some still in active service, others retired like Thunder. The shared understanding was palpable, a language of loyalty, courage, and healing. At the ceremony, Jake was invited to speak. He shared the story of how he found Thunder at an auction, the challenges they faced in recovery, and the mission they had built together to help others. His words resonated deeply with everyone present. "Thunder showed me that no matter how broken we may feel," Jake said, voice steady and clear, "there is always hope. The bond between a soldier and his companion can be a lifeline. It can give us the strength to heal and the courage to face tomorrow." After the speech, Jake and Thunder stood quietly among the crowd, soaking in the moment. Veterans approached to share their thanks, their stories, and sometimes just to touch Thunder's mane, a silent gesture of respect. Later, as the sun set, Jake found a quiet spot near a small pond. Thunder grazed peacefully nearby, the golden light casting long shadows. Jake knelt down, placing a hand on Thunder's neck. "We did it, buddy," he whispered. "We made it through." Thunder nickered softly in reply, the sound like a promise. Years later, Jake would look back on that day as one of the most important in his life, a day when he realized that the bond he shared with Thunder was more than friendship. It was a legacy of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest times, loyalty and love could light the way. And so, the soldier and his former warhorse continued their journey, not just as survivor and companion, but as beacons of healing for all who needed it. Their story, passed from one heart to another, became a lasting testament to the power of second chances and the unbreakable bond between a man and his horse. No matter where life took them next, one thing was certain: Jake and Thunder's loyalty would last forever,